Real to time. Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Special BRBC Mastermind by broker agreement. So just to begin with, I want to set the tone of what this mastermind is all about. This is not about going over the form, line by line, paragraph D, paragraph E. This is about the psychology of the buyer and the broker, right? Some of you for quite some time been using this agreement, and you're not new to the conversation of telling the buyer sign this agreement because of this reason, or commissions are negotiable because that's how it always works, or I'm worth that much and so is going to pay me, right? However, with the change kicking in when, Simon? August
13th.
August 13th, it's around the corner, right? No more compensation to the other to the buyer's broker on the MLS, and it's going to be mandatory to have the BRBC signed before we're going to show any property on the MLS. So we need to understand how to better improve our conversation. So with that being said, we have a few locations live right now. We're here in the South Bay. We got Eric and Brandon, and we have Long Beach. We have Stefan over there in Holly. Sam here too. There we go. And I'm not sure. We're supposed to have 2 more people. So whenever they're here, Nala, you can just you can highlight.
Richard is on here. I do see Richard. He's on.
Okay, cool. So we can have Richard Chang also like from the postal office and Brooke from the PV office. So just make sure to spotlight them. There we go. Hello, Richard. There we go. All right, you can just unmute yourself, Richard. So I just did a little intro, like what we're talking about basically, and it's about the psychology between the buyer and the broker. Okay. So first question for you guys, panelists, is any of you is currently using or was using the BRBC form?
No.
Yes.
Yes. Who said yes?
Me.
It didn't. Okay. Brooke. Okay. So and you've been using the BRBC for how long?
Years before it was called the BRBC. So I used the buyer rep agreement, the exclusive rep agreement prior to, and then I just transitioned straight into the BRBC.
Okay, got it. Okay, so one person on the panel that used those form.
Impressive.
Why is that?
What's that?
I said it was impressive, and many asked, why is that impressive? To Brooke's point, it's been an instrument and a tool that we've had access to, but for whatever reasons, and I'm sure there's many, we've never felt compelled to.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we have to use it.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so here's the first question for all of you, okay? And we can go by some kind of, start with Stefan over there, the far right corner on my screen. Hey, buyer, you want to see properties? Great. I'm going to simplify the conversation, okay? Sign over here on this agreement. All right, so Stefan, how would you even go about telling me like why I need to sign this agreement?
Well, I would first begin by asking the buyer how much they know about the changes that have taken place in the protocol for buyers buying property. And regardless of what their education level on the subject matter is or was, I would then proceed to go through our buyer presentation, not in a detailed way, but just in a conversational way, and explain to them that with this change, the buyer now has responsibility for paying their buyer's brokerage. And so in order for me to show you property and represent you, I need you to execute this document, and my fee for your price range is $20,000. Now, my objective is to negotiate that $20,000 as part of your purchase price, if that's what you choose, if that's what's best for you, Mr. Buyer. You may opt to pay the fee as part of your normal closing cost, or you may opt to have it rolled into your purchase price. The choice is yours.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Brandon, same question. How would you go about explaining the, why do you have to sign this? Listen, I've been buying homes for X amount of years, never had to sign anybody. Why should I sign this right now?
Yeah, I think Stefan brings up a really good point, which is, we have a good valid reason now to say, so many, have you ever been married before?
No,
Never have? You ever intend to get married?
sure.
Are you gonna sign a piece of paper saying you're married?
Let me ask her for a second.
No. It's, part of this whole process is our responsibility is to educate themselves. So I would probably go one step further and say, this is really new for me, myself. And where we're at in this place is you're probably wanting to know why you should work for me and hire me, just like I want to know if you're a good fit for me to work with you. And it starts with this conversation. So I think, again, Stefan did a really good job of at least saying, hey, I need to know and size up who's in front of me, whether it's level of experience, but I think it's going to be common practice for most of us in our area that most buyers in particular aren't used to signing something.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this helpful by the way so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Eric is big with investors, right? Hey, I'm investor, flipper, whatever. I mean, I forget about it. I'm not gonna sign this form.
Right. I mean, I know this is all new to all of us, Manny, right? So I understand your concern. However, I'm committed to helping you find this property. So I need some kind of commitment from you that if I find you that right property, you're going to work with me. Does that sound fair?
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a new form that our broker requires we sign. If I help find the right property, I just want to make sure you're going to work with me. And this just solidifies our agreement and our relationship.
Got it. Love it. Yeah, awesome. Put them in the spot, by the way. They weren't prepared for those kind of questions. So good job. Richard. Same question for you. Like, how would you explain the importance of this form, this so-called new form, new relationship between you and the buyer that will either ask you or maybe question it? Yeah.
Well, I think it's important, at least, I would say just within the last week, we've been getting the newer version of this form signed. And there's a big aha while explaining, so to speak, this form. And that was simply this. If it becomes a contracts class, you lose them. And what I mean by that is this. Sure, it's important to educate them on what this form means. We want that to be crystal clear. But I'm really trying to be intentional about adding tie downs, getting them to say yes, gaining agreement. Those are all sales techniques. Tie downs, gaining agreement throughout the form of going through it. And I found this is when you are doing a good job of really taking control and doing that, you don't even have to get into, hey, I'm here to help you find a house. I'm here to do this. I'm here to do that. When I first started off in my sales career, my mentor said this to me, and I always remember this and think about this. A true relevant buyer will follow every step you give them. If this form were 50 pages, I would get them to sign all 50 pages. It's just as simple as that. But you're also at the same time, you got to just make sure that you're adding tie downs throughout the whole thing instead of just explaining. So that's what I'm trying to be more intentional of doing.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Thank you. Brooke, I finished with you because you're already doing it. You're applying it, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that for a second, and then tell us, are you going to have any different discussions moving forward? Because now it's mandatory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I am going to do differently maybe than you're going to be doing, Stefan, is not talking dollars, but percentages, because that's what people are used to, with 2.5% to 3% on the commissions. It's been transparent up until this point on the estimated closing statement and closing costs and all of that stuff. So that's not a new thing for them. So I come from the position of we do need to ratify our relationship. We do need to formalize it. Nobody has a choice in this. If an agent comes to you and says you don't need to sign something, then they're breaking the law. It's just how it is. Now, is this going to be, I've gone through scenarios of people, and I've had this happen in the past, where they don't want to lock in an exclusive, like Brandon, investors. They don't want to lock in an exclusive on just umbrella everything, even a non-exclusive. So with those types of people, what I've done in the past is I have in my DocuSign, I have a template for the BRBC for investors, so that when the time comes that I do find something for them, then I'm property specific and I put in the address. And that way, at least it ties me to that address. And this is, again, for people, not your typical buyer, for investors who just put up the wall to signing anything. Now, for regular buyers, it's just a part of my business. Now, prior to the 17th, everything was taken care of on the MLS, and it was just status quo. And after the 17th and from now forward, the conversation is, we're essentially going to be ending up in the same place. My job is, number one, to represent you to the highest level, protect you, but also to try to negotiate these fees into the contract, into the purchase agreement. So when we make an offer on a property, that is going to be tied to it, so that the seller gives us concessions and we're able to cover your commission fee or the, whatever we're going to be calling it, on the buy side. I think that people, if they have the impression that they're going to have to come out of pocket 20 grand or however much it's going to be, they're going to freak out. But when it's
Hold on 1 second, Brooke, about the commission part, because that's the third part I'm going to break into, as I said earlier. So just about the presentation, about the objection handling. So in the sense of like, why should I sign this? But clearly you're already doing it currently, right? So nothing different than what you've done so far, right?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So anybody else to add to that?
Many, there was some questions in the chat about specific examples of tie downs that they would use when talking about the agreement. I think Richard was talking about that, if you could share any of those examples.
Yeah, sure. Well, okay, I'm not muted. Yeah, that's a great question. To be more specific, I would even start off the very beginning of the conversation with making sure I gain agreement with yeses. So I'm asking things like, just repeating, like a server would repeat your order. Okay, so you're looking for a 2 to 3 bedroom house. Is that correct? And you need to buy within the next 3 months. Great. Is that correct? Well, great. Well, here's what happens next. Now that we're moving forward with having you hire me as your exclusive agent, that's a tie down. I'm already telling them, now that we're moving forward with having you hire me as your exclusive agent, let's take care of some paperwork. Do I have your name spelled correctly here? Yes. Okay, good. And the date is correct, right? I'm not mistaken. Good. Another yes, another yes. And look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over our buyer representation agreement, which actually does an amazing job of explaining to you what my duties are. Wouldn't it be great just to have a clear understanding of what those duties are? That's another tie down. So yeah, you're just sprinkling these little tie downs that they don't see it as a tie down, of course. And if they do see it as a tie down, you're not doing a good job of it. But you're using these in there to let them know, oh, it's an exclusive agreement. Oh, well, I guess this is what's happening. I guess I'm hiring you. And so that's how I would start off, but they're really throughout the entire conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, just hold those questions aside until the commission part. We're going to get to that. Any other comments about this part? Stefan, Brooke?
I think that there's and I could be wrong on this. I think there's a difference between the new BRBC document than the one we've used previously, in that in the previous version of that agreement, we had 100% expectation and almost assurance that every property we showed was going to have a commission attached to it from the MLS. And that's no longer the case. So when we get that document executed currently by the buyer is assuming responsibility to pay our fee. We're going to use our advanced sales skills and training to get them to understand our value and to get them to understand that we may negotiate that into their overall sales price. However, when they sign that document, they're signing that document assuming responsibility for our commission, and that's new.
Okay, so that's a great way to pivot to commission part, which is the most important piece, right? And everybody, everybody here is a bit concerned about this part of like, buyer's gonna pay me. Right. Okay, so hold on. Brooke has the biggest smile, so you're gonna go first, Brooke.
Oh, great. What's the question?
The question is, talk to us about the money part, where, and Stefan made a good point. It was kind of obvious that we're gonna get paid on the, from the listing side, right? Back for a
Very
second.
good.
But now it's on the buyer responsibility, even though, yes, it's negotiable, blah, blah, blah. But
Mhm.
how do you go about that piece? Like, hey, buyer, yes, you're gonna pay me 3% commission. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a different way of coming to the same conclusion and ending for any escrow or any transaction. We're just having to involve the buyer on the front end versus having the listing agent and the listing and the seller take care of it on the backside, because everything was public. Everything was already disclosed online. So now what we're needing to do is the association that the buyer has with the buyer's agent is a linear one now. And the payment for those services is linear. And again, I lean into the word formalizing the relationship, just because in any business relationship, you do need to do that. And then the other thing that I let them know is I will be talking to the I lean in hard on the lender allowing those concessions. And I talked to my guy at Citi this morning. He hasn't gotten any updates. I don't know if anybody else has on how the lenders, the Fed was talking about it a couple of months ago, that they're going to be allowing that, and especially with VA loans and stuff like that. But making sure that if you have a very savvy buyer, you're going to be looking at, okay, now we've got seller concessions for how is that going to impact the amount of credits that I might be able to ask for once we get into escrow, because there's going to be a cap and a limit that the lender and the Fed is going to be instilling. So with all of that, it's really more the education of it's all going to be folded within the framework of the offer. There's going to be a checkbox on the purchase agreement that's going to have a form that's called seller payment to buyer broker. That is all going to be part of the agreement that we submit over to the seller. And then that's where the negotiations start. The buyer broker agreement that's tied to it, I am, and I know that we're looking at 2.5%, 3%, whatever everybody is. I always put the 3% in there, because sometimes you're at 2.5, sometimes you're at 3, and I don't want to bog them down with amending a 2.5 if somebody's going to be paying for 3. And also, I've already heard of sellers or listing agents asking for your BRBC to see what your agreement is with your buyer, so that they can then match that. So you want to be very careful about what you put in there. I know I'm getting a little bit off topic on what we're going to be talking about with our buyers, but all of that plays into it, so that that is part of why you're hiring me to negotiate for you, why I'm a bulldog when it comes to negotiating. And I am going to protect you and get you the best property at the best price under the best terms, period, end of story.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's definitely all just spot on good information. Brandon, then Eric.
For me, I really like to try and qualify people right out of the gate. So, to Brooke's point, I think we need to have a good understanding that the decoupling has happened. And so now, if you're the buyer, my responsibility is to not only come to an agreement. I love the word formality, right, that Brooke used. In order for us to accomplish that, we need to share some information. So what used to happen, Minnie, is my fee that I normally charge for services was part of what the seller was offering, and that no longer exists. So I want you to know that my fee for services is going to be X. Are you okay with that? I want to know, right, just how they respond. If they're coming from another state, or if they have some, if they're in the commercial space, they're already used to having that conversation. I don't necessarily want to go on a big rant about it. I want to just size up what it is. So now if they're not familiar with that, again, I want to go back and educate how things were, what that means. And if you have any concerns of how that's going to be paid, we have solutions for those. And I can get into a little details. I personally still feel that the two need to be separated. So my conversations with buyers, my fee is one thing. Any concessions you need is a separate thing. Either way, we'll negotiate that in the contract. To the point Brooke was asking about lenders, I think from what I understand, that's what lenders want. They want that separation. It's okay to include your compensation, but that's the approach that I'm taking.
Yeah, That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, and I'm on the same boat with that. The thing about real estate is we all realize it's all case by case basis. Everybody's so different, every property is different. So it's kind of hard to blanket all of this in this 30-minute conversation. So you have to read each situation, right? We all know that a first-time buyer is not going to be able to afford that $15,000, $20,000 fee, right? So I'm going to explain it in the way where I'm going to say we're going to try to get it from the seller, which seems like everybody's first option. It's in the benefit of the seller, so we have to, as an industry, explain that to sellers as well, so we stay on the same page. And two, if that's not a possibility, then we have to see how we can finance my commission into your deal, and then that trickles down into the conversation of the lenders allowing more seller credit. So yeah, the fundamentals stay the same. We've been negotiating contracts, doing presentations, and doing all that forever, right? It's the communication with the listing agent. Are you guys offering a fee? Are you not? And the agents that do get this pre-negotiated fee for the buyer's agent, right, will realize that what buyer's agent should get a fee. And it's all right. That's all in the way you.
Go ahead.
The way you.
Yo llego en 10 minutos y me voy a ir al second floor.
Someone needs to mute there.
Someone needs to mute.
Who is that?
They're negotiating a buyer broker agreement right now, actually. Live.
Case study.
There we go.
The fundamentals stay the same, guys. Since day one, we've been negotiating contracts, presenting, talking about fees. So don't let this convolute you so much that it kind of puts a halt on your situation. Come up with a solution. It's just another form. In my eyes, maybe I'm not giving it as much weight as it should, but I feel like it's a little blown out of proportion. It's just a form. You're gonna get paid somehow because that's the way it's always worked for a reason. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to ask the panel is your practice going to be to talk to the listing agent prior to writing that offer to see if a concession is going to be given by the seller? Because if that's going to be your practice, the conversation for the BRBC becomes much easier, because then it's before we write an offer, we're going to know. So don't worry, you're not going to pay me until we have a fully executed. It's not going to happen until we have total transparency on what the seller is willing to do. And if the listing agent is doing what we hope they're doing for the industry, which is status quo, and they're talking to their sellers about, look, we got to offer compensation. It's just a different way of doing it, but we still have to work the way we have before, where you're offering compensation to the buyer's agent, then that conversation has already happened with the listing agent and the seller. So we're putting faith in the listing agents also to have responsibility there.
With that being said, there's a full discussion, buddy, that the first thing that you have to think about is the best interest of the buyer. Okay, so if the buyer want to see a house in wherever, that's what you need to focus on. And then you're going to go on the listing agent's website, social media. Maybe there's a link to another page in their MLS, because they cannot mention concession in the MLS anymore. Compensation, sorry. And find out what the commission is, but it shouldn't be a subject to. Richard, question for you: the same thing about the commissions, or your compensation with the buyer?
I'm sorry, can you remind me of the exact question, please?
Yes. So hey Manny, let's go see this house. Let's sign this agreement, and yes, you're gonna pay me a 3% commission. Okay. How's that going to happen? So how do you overcome this objection of the commission part to you by the buyer?
Oh yeah. My philosophy, my approach always on objections is to avoid the objection, and that's by addressing it first. We call it a pre-uncovering an objection. And so if I'm talking about concessions right from the beginning, I'm letting them know, hey, now we're going to talk about what our what our compensation is. Mr. Buyer, I start off at 2% of what my compensation is for any client that I work with. And in order to give you good context on what that all means, I think it's important for me to let you know how it used to be. And then I'm going to go into, well, how it used to be, because look, we have to understand that most of these buyers are first-time home buyers. They don't even know how it used to be. So I'm going to give the context on how it used to be, how it was incredibly flawed, and how much better it is now. But the good news is we can still ask the seller to help us through either credit or compensation. And the beauty about it is now it's crystal clear that my fiduciary duty is towards you. And of course, you might get the objection of, well, what if we find something that they're not going to pay for? Well, then you have every right not to look at that home. If we are not going to be paid, and it's not within your budget to purchase that home, you have every right not to put an offer on that home. And I'll tell you this: people may be skeptical. Oh no, that's not going to work. I have proof that does work, and they say, oh, okay, I get it. Let's skip that one if they're not going to pay. And number two, I've had probably more I read on the chat. I'm not trying to call anybody out because I think all of us are thinking that buyers are not going to want to pay us. I would say it's pretty shocking, even to me sometimes, that buyers are asking me, so what do you charge?
Yeah.
How much is this going to cost? They are actually asking me if I don't address it. So absolutely buyers are willing to pay you. It's not true at all that no buyers are willing to pay.
Yeah, Spot, thank you. That was a good point, and a good practice as well, right? Stefan.
Yeah, I think that if we take this opportunity and focus on the process remaining as it was, that we're missing the opportunity to race out and shape the process for what it will be. In an ideal world, the seller will offer enough commission in the entire process to keep it as it was. And if that's the case, fine. But if that's not the case, then we have to adapt our thinking and adapt our processes. And I think there's a distinction that we're missing because we raced right to talk about the commission, but we have to have the buyer execute that buyer broker agreement to show them property.
Yeah.
So there is no listing agent at that process to contact to find out. So we must have the conversation about the buyer assuming responsibility for our commission. And our approach is to do it in something of this fashion. Mr. Buyer, you're going to purchase this property around $800,000. Typically in this neighborhood, properties will appreciate 4 to 4.5% a year. And so are you still planning on remaining in the property for 5 to 7 years? Terrific. So your property is going to appreciate 20 to 25% over that time frame. Our fee to represent you is 2.5%. And so to make a 2.5% investment to realize a 25% gain seems like a reasonable ask. Wouldn't you agree? And then we reference, again, the power of our brand, and we reference our education. I think it's imperative that we all obtain an expert negotiation credential. I don't know if Brandon knows anywhere we can get that done, but if we all have the ability to put next to our name that we've been educated on how to negotiate on the buyer's behalf, it's going to go a long way in helping us ask in the beginning of our relationship, when we first talk to them, before we show them property, that they're going to pay us this fee. I'll make one other point. The Consumer Federation of America is a big consumer advocate group that's pushing a lot of this. And part of their conversation is to get the buyer to talk and ask questions about dollar amounts. So I would speculate that at some point in the near future, we're not going to be able to get away with 2.5%. We're going to actually have to show $25,000.
Right. Yeah. Good point, Stefan. Thank you. Last thought about this subject? Last comments? Okay. So I know there's a lot more to dive into and discuss, and maybe you have questions. So 2 things. And by the way, there's a reason that we did this session so condensed, so we can focus only on one aspect of it, the psychology pretty much, not to overwhelm you with the transactional part or what have you. We're going to have more sessions. So take it easy. And whoever had questions, we saw your questions, great questions. Do us a favor, send me an email directly, meny@kw.com. That's my first name. And I'm going to make sure to address those questions directly. or through our broker, Simon, or through any of the panelists. So I want to thank you, Stefan, Brandon, Eric, Richard, Brooke, for your time, your mindset, your knowledge, and sharing with us this information. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Holly, thank you, Rich and Simon. Now, stay on the Zoom if you want to stay for the South Bay team meeting right over here. And if you're around, there's food outside too.